Vänner, dear friends, hyvät ystävät, hyvät toverit.
Dear friends, dear comrades.
Tervetuloa
Welcome
Helsinkiin.
to Helsinki.
Pohjoismaisella
The Nordic Social
sosiaalidemokraattisella
Democratic
yhteistyöllä
Corporation
on
has
pitkät
long
perinteet.
traditions.
Pohjoismaisten työväenpuolueiden ja ammattiliittojen ensimmäinen työläiskongressi pidettiin Ruotsin Göteborgissa jo vuonna 1886. Lähes 140 vuodessa on tapahtunut paljon. Olemme pitkäjänteisellä arvopohjaisella politiikalla luoneet pohjoismaisen hyvinvointivaltion, jossa heikoimmista pidetään huolta. Samalla olemme määrätietoisesti pyrkineet rakentamaan kansainvälistä sääntöpohjaista maailmanjärjestystä, jossa vahvimman oikeuden ja konfliktin tilalla on rauhanomainen yhteistyö. Haluamme vahvistaa sellaista kansainvälistä yhteisöä, joka pystyy edistämään kaikkialla tasa-arvoa, ihmisoikeuksia ja demokratiaa sekä vastaamaan yhteisiin haasteisiimme köyhyydestä, ilmastonmuutoksesta ja luontokadosta. Tässä olemme
We have succeeded in many of these points.
Euroopan unioni
European
on
Union
maailmanhistorian
is in the world
onnistunein
history the most
rauhanprojekti.
successful peace project.
Kansainväliset järjestöt,
The
kuten
international organizations
YK,
like the UN,
ja Euroopan neuvosto ovat haasteistaan huolimatta
and the Council
osoitus
of Europe,
siitä, että
despite
meillä
the
on yhteistä
challenges,
tahtoa
are a proof
kohdata
that we have
suurimmatkin
a common will
vaikeudet
to face
ja
even the
että
greatest
vahvimman
difficulties,
oikeudelle
and there
on
are
vaihtoehtoja.
alternatives to the supremacy of the strongest.
Tämän kehityksen Venäjä
Russia,
raakalaismaisella
with brutal
hyökkäyksellään
invasion to Ukraine,
Ukrainaan
wants to
haluaa
destroy this development.
pyrkimällä laittomasti
It is trying
väkivalloin
illegally,
ja uhreista
violently, and while
välittämättä
ignoring the victims, to conquer
valtaamaan
its
naapurivaltion. Venäjä
neighboring
haluaa
state.
palata
And with this, Russia
etupiirien
wants to
aikaan.
return to the time of
Putinin
colliding interests.
maailmankuvassa ainoa
In Putin's world,
merkityksellinen
the only measure
mittari
that
on
matters is
raakavoima.
raw power.
Tämä on kaiken sen
This
vastakohta,
is
mitä olemme
contrary to
rakentaneet
everything we have been
pohjoismaisina
building as Nordic
hyvinvointivaltioina.
welfare states.
Venäjä ei saa onnistua
Russia cannot
pyrkimyksissään.
succeed in its
Siksi seisomme
aspirations.
Ukrainan
Therefore, we
rinnalla
stand with
niin
Ukraine
kauan
as
kuin on
long
tarpeen.
as needed.
Me toimitamme
We
aseita
will deliver
sekä
arms
taloudellista
and
ja
financial
humanitaarista
and humanitarian
apua
help
niin kauan
as long
kuin on
as
tarpeen.
needed.
Me tuemme Ukrainan
We will
valintaa
support
edetä
Ukraine's
polulla
choice to
kohti
progress on the
Euroopan
path towards
unionin ja
membership of the
Naton
European Union
jäsenyyteen.
and NATO.
Venäjä pitää
Russia
saattaa
must be held
vastuuseen
accountable
laittomasta
for this
sodasta.
illegal war.
Sotarikokset
War
pitää
crimes must
tutkia
be
ja
investigated
syylliset pitää
and the guilty
tuomita.
parties must be sentenced.
Ukrainassa tehdyt julmuudet
The cruelties
eivät
carried
saa
out in
jäädä
Ukraine cannot be
rankaisematta.
left unpunished.
Venäjän hyökkäys
The
Ukrainaan
Russian
muutti
invasion in Ukraine changed
peruuttamattomasti Euroopan
irreversibly
turvallisuutta.
security in Europe.
Muuttuneessa
This
tilanteessa
has changed
Suomen ja
the
Ruotsin
situation. In the
johtopäätös oli
situation,
selvä.
Finland and Sweden had a
Sotilaallinen
conclusion that was
liittoutumattomuus
clear.
ei enää
Military
palvellut
non-alliance
meidän
was no longer
turvallisuuttamme.
serving our security.
Viime keväänä
Last
Suomen ja
spring,
Ruotsin
the
sosiaalidemokraattisissa
Social Democratic
puolueissa
Finland and
tehtiin
Sweden made
perusteellinen,
thorough
mutta nopea
but
arvio
rapid evaluation
siitä,
that
että Suomen ja
enabled
Ruotsin
Finland
on syytä
and
hakea
Sweden
Naton
to
jäsenyyttä.
apply for membership in NATO.
Kuten Magdalena Andersson asian Münchenin turvallisuuskonferenssin puheessaan sanoitti, päätös hakea Naton jäsenyyttä oli vaikea, sillä se tarkoitti uuden sivun kääntämistä. Myös Suomen osalta jäsenyyden hakeminen tarkoitti vuosikymmenten ulkopoliittisen perinteen muutosta. Päätös oli rohkea, koska jouduimme tekemään suuren ratkaisun epävarmuuden keskellä. Silti odottaminen ja päätösten lykkäys olisi suistanut sekä Ruotsin että Suomen vieläkin vaarallisempaan tilanteeseen, ehkä hyvin pitkäksi aikaa. Päätös oli lopulta myös helppo, sillä 24. helmikuuta 2022 sen jälkeen oli selvää, ettei vanhaan enää ollut paluu. Olemme hakeneet Naton jäseniksi, täytämme jäsenyyden kriteerit ja luotamme siihen, että Nato myös hyväksyy meidät liittolaisiksi Vilnan huippukokoukseen mennessä. Tulevaisuudessa Suomen ja Ruotsin Naton jäsenyys vahvistaa koko liittokunnan turvallisuutta. Samalla se lisää mahdollisuuksia pohjoismaiselle yhteistyölle. Sanomme tämän myös pohjoismaisena sosiaalidemokraatteina. Vahva NATO, jonka jäseninä haluamme olla, on kansainväliselle rauhalle ja turvallisuudelle oleellinen, suorastaan elintärkeä. Kiitos myös Jens Stoltenbergille, paitsi läsnäolostasi tänään, myös tuessasi prosessin joka vaiheessa. Myös pohjoismainen yhteistyö näytti vahvuutensa viime keväänä, kun historiallista päätöstä tehtiin. Kiitos tästä kuuluu Magdalena Anderssonille ja koko ruotsalaiselle sisarpuolueelle. Rakentamamme pohjoismainen hyvinvointivaltio on osoittanut toimivuutensa juuri kriisien keskellä. Se on tuonut resilienssiä kriiseistä selviytymiseen. Juuri siksi me pohjoismaiset sosiaalidemokraatit rakennamme myös tulevaisuutemme hyvinvointivaltion varaan. Tulevaisuuden pohjoismainen hyvinvointivaltio on ekologisesti, sosiaalisesti ja taloudellisesti kestävä. Venäjän hyökkäys Ukrainaan ei anna meille lisäaikaa ilmastokriisin ratkaisemisessa. Päinvastoin, Venäjän hyökkäyssota ja sen paljastamat riippuvuudet osoittavat, että vain vihreän siirtymän kautta voimme varmistaa tulevaisuudessa myös sosiaalisen ja taloudellisen hyvinvoinnin. Oikeudenmukainen vihreä siirtymä on valtava taloudellinen mahdollisuus, joka pohjoismaisen työväenliikkeen on pystyttävä täysimääräisesti hyödyntämään. Menestyäksemme meidän on luotava uutta teollisuuspolitiikkaa, joka perustuu osaamiselle, päästöttömille teknologioille sekä rohkeudelle investoida tulemaan. Samalla meidän on oltava aktiivisia eurooppalaisen strategisen autonomian rakentamisessa. Naiviuteen ei enää ole varaa. Kyse on kyvystämme kohdata ulkoisia haasteita ja turvata yhteiskuntiemme toiminta kaikissa tilanteissa. Hyvät ystävät, kära vänner, pohjoismaisella sosiaalidemokraattisella yhteistyöllä on saavutettu paljon. 1,5 vuosisadan aikana tehty työ kantaa meitä tänäkin päivänä ja siitä me voimme olla ylpeitä. Meidän on jatkossakin määrätietoisesti puolustettava arvojamme ja pohjoismaisen hyvinvointivaltion periaatteita. Nyt on oikea aika pohjoismaisen hyvinvointivaltion ja globaalin sääntöpohjaisen maailmanjärjestyksen tulevaisuuden rakentamiselle. Sen äärelle me olemme tänään kokoontuneet myös tässä SAMAKin huippukokouksessa. Tervetuloa, hyvät ystävät.
Thank you very much. And then I welcome our main or only guest on the podium. I was State Secretary to your government. Very happy to have you here, Jens. Welcome.
Thank you so much, dear Sanna. It's great to be back in Helsinki and great to be at the SAMAK meeting. I feel among friends, I feel among colleagues, and I feel that I'm attending a kind of family gathering of my political family, and it's some years since last time, so it's really great to see you all. I attended my first meeting of this forum, the Nordic Social Democratic Parties and the trade unions, when I was newly elected leader of the AOF, or the Young Social Democratic Party in Norway, in 1985. That was at Bommersvik, and it was Olof Palme that welcomed us all there, and then I think it was Kalvi Soisa from Finland, and it was Anker Jørgensen from Denmark, and then Jon Hannibalsson from Iceland. A great guy, and then of course Gro Harlem Brundtland. And since then, together with Gudmundur, we have attended different SAMAK meetings for almost 30 years, and then I had a break for almost 10 years now. So it's great to be back, and really I was very pleased when I was invited, and normally we spend a lot of time considering whether I have time, but actually I just decided that we just have to find time to go to the SAMAK meeting in Helsinki and to meet with all of you. So thank you so much for inviting me. It is also fitting that we are meeting today in Helsinki, a city that has helped to shape the foundations of European security. The Helsinki Final Act helped reduce Cold War tensions by encouraging cooperation and embedding the principles of freedom and human rights. 35 countries from North America and Europe signed the Helsinki Final Act, the Soviet Union included, committing to settle disputes peacefully, respect sovereign borders, and refrain from the threat or the use of force. President Putin has now shattered these principles. We may be shocked by the brutality of the war against Ukraine, but we should not be surprised. This is part of a pattern of Russian aggression over many years. In Grozny, in Georgia, in Aleppo, in Crimea and Donbass, and now a full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. NATO allies shared intelligence, precise intelligence, about Moscow's plans for an invasion many months ahead. We made every effort to engage in diplomatic and political dialogue with Russia to prevent the war. But despite our calls, President Putin chose to attack. 1 year on, Putin is not preparing for peace. He is preparing for more war. So while the fighting continues, we can already now draw some lessons of the war. First, we must sustain and step up our support to Ukraine. Russia is launching new offensives, mobilizing more troops, and reaching out to North Korea and Iran to get more weapons. We are also increasingly concerned that China may be planning to provide lethal support for Russia's war. So we must give Ukraine what they need to prevail. I welcome the significant support Nordic countries are delivering to Ukraine. This is making a difference on the battlefield every day, and I thank all the Nordic countries for their support. Together, NATO allies are providing well over 100 billion euros to Ukraine. We must now urgently deliver on our pledges of training and heavy weaponry, so that key capabilities can reach Ukraine before Russia can seize the momentum. I hear concerns that our support increases the risk of escalation. But as long as our biggest neighbor is willing to invade another country, there are no risk-free options. So let there be no doubt. The biggest risk of all is if President Putin wins in Ukraine. If he wins, it will show authoritarian leaders that aggression works and force is rewarded. That will make the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. So supporting Ukraine is not only the morally right thing to do, it is also in our own security interest. We do not know when this war will end, but when it does, we must ensure that history does not repeat itself. President Putin cannot continue to chip away at European security. We must break the cycle of Russian aggression, meaning we must enable Ukraine to deter and defend against future aggression. We must put in place long-term arrangements for Ukraine's security, because Ukraine's future is in the Euro-Atlantic family. The second lesson is that we must continue to strengthen our deterrence and defense. As Nordic countries, and in particular as Nordic social democrats, we have tried to live peacefully alongside our largest neighbor for decades. At the end of the Cold War, many of us in this room believed we could build a better relationship with Russia, me included. And I still believe it was the right thing to do, to seize the historic moment to build better security in Europe together with Russia. But President Putin chose to walk away from cooperation and dialogue. He has left a trail of broken promises, shattered fundamental principles of global security, attacking neighboring countries, and tried to undermine our own democracies. The latest example is Russia suspending the New START treaty, limiting nuclear weapons. And we have to remember this is actually the last main arms control arrangement we have. Not many years ago, Russia violated the INF treaty, banning all intermediate range weapons. That led to the demise of that treaty, and now the last important arms control arrangement is the New START, and And President Putin made it clear a few days ago that Russia has suspended their participation in the New START agreement. So over the last years, Russia has violated key arms control agreements, dismantling the whole arms control architecture. So we have to recognize that the end of this war will not be a return to normal in our relations with Russia. There is no going back. In a more dangerous world, we can no longer afford to treat defense as optional. It is a necessity. Yes, I know that it's hard to spend more on defense, because when you spend more on defense, it's less for something else. It's less money for education, for infrastructure, for health, for all the other things we feel it's more meaningful to invest in than defense. So when we spend more on defense, there is less money for other important tasks. But nothing is more important than our security, and that's the reason why we have to invest more in defense. I also therefore welcome the fact that almost all NATO allies have now plans in place to spend 2% of GDP on defense, and that an increasing number of allies see 2% as a floor, not a ceiling, for defense spending. The third lesson is that we need to strengthen the resilience of our societies. Military forces are necessary to protect our security, but they are not enough. Strong societies and robust economies are our first line of defense. So we must secure our cyberspace, supply chains, and critical infrastructure. The war in Ukraine has demonstrated the danger of being over-dependent on authoritarian regimes. Not so long ago, many argued that importing Russian gas was purely an economic issue. It is not. It is a political issue. It matters for our security. Europe's dependency on Russian gas made us vulnerable. We should not make the same mistake with China and other authoritarian regimes. We must not become too dependent on products and raw materials we import, or export key technologies that could be used against us. And we must protect our critical infrastructure at home. Of course, we should continue to trade and engage economically with China, but economic interests cannot outweigh our security interests. We know that Beijing is watching closely what happens in Ukraine, the price Russia pays, or the reward it receives for its aggression. So what's happening in Europe today could happen in Asia tomorrow. Our security is not regional, our security is global. Let me then end with a few words about Finland and Sweden's NATO membership. First, I would like to commend and praise Sanna Marin and Magdalena Andersson for their political leadership, because they actually demonstrated political leadership, courage, when they led their countries to make the historic decision to apply for membership in NATO. And then all NATO allies made an historic decision when we decided to invite Finland and Sweden to join at our summit in Madrid in June last year. So far, this has been the fastest accession process in NATO's modern history. Finland and Sweden applied in May last year. All NATO allies invited you to join at the Madrid summit in June. And 28 out of 30 allies have already ratified the accession protocols. Completing Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO is a priority for NATO. I had good discussions with President Erdogan in Ankara recently, and we are making progress. I have made clear that both Finland and Sweden have delivered on the commitments in the trilateral memorandum agreed with Turkey at the NATO summit. and that the time has come to finalize the ratification process. I'm glad that President Erdogan agreed to restart discussions, and I will convene another meeting of the Permanent Joint Mechanism at NATO headquarters next week. I also expect that the Hungarian Parliament will complete ratification shortly. Finland and Sweden's application to NATO have already strengthened your security. You are sitting at NATO's table and integrating into our political and military structures. NATO has increased its presence in the region. We are exercising more together, and many allies have given Finland and Sweden security assurances. So it is inconceivable that NATO allies would not act if your security was threatened. So friends, NATO is a big family of 30 free nations across Europe and North America, soon to be 32. We represent half of the world's military might and half of the world's economic might. And we provide security guarantees like no one other, one for all and all for one. Bringing the Nordic family together around NATO's table will make Finland and Sweden safer, our alliance stronger, and the whole Euro-Atlantic area more secure. So I look forward to welcoming you both as soon as possible. It is time to finalize the process and to have Finland and Sweden as full members of our alliance. And then I look forward to our discussion and to continue to be together with this great family. Thank you.
So Jens, thank you so much for your very inspiring words. We know that you will stay here a bit longer and there will be room for colleagues. Leaders of the trade unions here, and I'm very glad and pleased that also Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg was able to participate in this meeting. We will discuss, of course, about the situation in Ukraine, Sweden's and Finland's NATO membership application, security policy in Europe more widely, and I'm very glad that Jens was able to participate and give his notes on the topical issues that we will discuss about. But further ado, I would like to give the floor to you, and then I think that the media might have some questions for us.
Thank you so much, Sanna. It's great to be back in Helsinki. It's great to be back in this building and meet with the leaders of the social democratic parties and the trade unions of the Nordic countries. This is actually a forum I used to participate in myself for many, many years. But now I'm here as Secretary General of NATO, and of course we meet at a critical time for our security. President Putin's war in Ukraine against Ukraine grinds on, and there are no signs that he's changing his plans. He wants to control Ukraine, and he is not planning for peace, he's planning for more war, and therefore it is extremely important that we provide support to Ukraine, and I commend the strong support that Finland has provided to Ukraine. This makes a difference on the battlefield every day. Then I'll also meet later on today President Sauli Niinistö and Foreign Minister Pekka Haavisto, and in all my meetings today I expect that the issue of Finnish and the Swedish membership will be an important topic. And as you all know, all NATO allies made an historic decision to invite both Finland and Sweden to become members of the alliance. We are making progress. A couple of weeks ago I met with President Erdogan, and we agreed to have a meeting with Finland, Sweden, Turkey in Brussels next week. My message is that both Finland and Sweden have delivered on what they promised in the trilateral agreement they made with Turkey last June in Madrid. So the time is now to ratify and to fully welcome both Finland and Sweden as members. Thank you.
Helsingin Sanomat to Mrs. Stoltenberg, you said that we are making progress with Finland and Sweden. When
So this is a top priority for NATO and for me personally. So we work hard and we have to remember that so far this is the quickest accession process in NATO's modern history. Finland and Sweden applied in May. Then already in June, all NATO allies agreed to invite Finland and Sweden, and then all 30 allies, also Turkey, agreed on the accession protocols and signed the accession protocols. And so far, 28 out of 30 allies have already ratified in the national parliaments. The Hungarian parliament has made it clear that they will start the discussions within a few days, so I hope that they will ratify soon. When it comes to Turkey, they have expressed some concerns, mainly about Sweden. My message is that both Finland and Sweden have lived up to what they agreed to in the trilateral agreement. Let me add one more thing, and that is that Finland and Sweden are in a much better place now than before they applied, because as invitees, Finland and Sweden sit at the NATO table, are integrated into NATO's civilian and military structures. Several NATO allies have also provided bilateral security assurances. So it's inconceivable that there will be any threat against Finland or Sweden without NATO reacting. So I cannot give you an exact date, but we are working to make it happen as soon as possible.
Should NATO as an organization take an even more determined role in pushing Turkey's and Hungary's ratifications rather than Finland, Sweden, Turkey?
Well, so first of all, decisions in NATO are made by consensus, and we have made the decisions we need to make as NATO already. We made them back in June when all 30 allies made the decision to invite Turkey and invite Finland and Sweden as full members. And we made the decision as at 30 when we agreed the accession protocols. What remains now are decisions that have to be taken as individual allies, and that is the ratification in the national parliaments. That's not a decision that we can take together. It has to be taken in each and every capital. And so far 28 have ratified, 2 have not. But it is a priority for me, and we are working hard, and we are using the argument that of course it will be good for Finland and Sweden, but it will also be good for NATO, for all of us, to have Finland and Sweden as members as soon as possible.
Lauri Nurmi, Iltalehti Finland, question for Secretary General Stoltenberg. You are saying that Mr. Putin wants more war, not peace. So my question is, should NATO or specific NATO countries provide security guarantees to Ukraine? Otherwise, Russia will occupy Ukraine sooner or later. And Prime Minister Marin, please give also your comments on this issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, first, also what NATO allies and also partners as Finland and Sweden do, and also the European Union and many others, is that we are providing unprecedented level of military support to Ukraine. We are not party to the conflict, but we need to remember what this is. This is a war of aggression launched by President Putin against Ukraine. They have the right to defend themselves. That is right which is enshrined in the UN Charter, and we have the right to help support Ukraine in upholding the right of self-defense. Then, of course, NATO also has another task, and that is to prevent escalation, prevent this from becoming a full-fledged war between between Russia and NATO. And therefore, we have also increased our military presence in the eastern part of the alliance, also in the Baltic region, to send a clear message that an attack on a NATO ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. The important thing now is to support Ukraine, and then no one can tell exactly when this war ends. But when it ends, we need to ensure that history doesn't repeat itself, that President Putin cannot continue to attack neighbors. And therefore, we need to strengthen the military capabilities of Ukraine, but also look for frameworks that can ensure that President Putin, Russia, doesn't invade Ukraine yet another time.
So security guarantees after the war, like what's the external growth?
So what NATO allies have agreed that Ukraine will become a member of our alliance, but at the same time that is a long-term perspective. What is the issue now is to ensure that Ukraine prevail as a sovereign independent nation, and that therefore we need to support Ukraine.
I see that the future of Ukraine is to be part of European Union and also member of NATO. We have taken many steps forward when it comes to military aid to Ukraine, and I'm very glad that we are now cooperating together much more closely to give Ukraine more heavy weapons. I think the discussion now, even though it's have taken some time, it's been very important concerning, for example, the Leopards. So countries are cooperating together more closely and more widely, and this is a very good thing. We have to support Ukraine as long as it takes, and they also need more heavy weapons. And the faster and the sooner we can give them more heavy weapons, the sooner the war will end. And this is something that we also need, that cooperation between the democratic countries. Finland has taken many decisions on armed support to Ukraine, and we are willing to continue this as long as it takes.
Stein Osgood, Norwegian newspaper Dagbladet. Prime Minister Marin, could you describe just why it's so important for Finland to become a full-fledged NATO member as soon as possible? And if you don't mind, what role Secretary General Stoltenberg has played in your membership pursuits?
The reason why we have applied NATO membership, it's very simple. NATO line is the only line that Russia wouldn't cross. And this was the question that we had to ask ourselves when Russia invaded, attacked brutally Ukraine. I'm also very glad that we have been able to work so closely with Sweden during the process. And of course we see that both Finland and Sweden not only will have made this decision for our own interest, but it's also the NATO's interest that we will become members together simultaneously. We are sharing the same security environment. We are up here in the north, and we will also strengthen the whole defense of the northern part of Europe. We have many capabilities, and when you ask Finnish people, their willingness, and this is one example, their willingness to defend their own country, it's very high. I think it ranks number one or almost number one worldwide. We also have quite wide military forces in Finland because we have always invested in this. We know we have aggressive neighbor that we are now seeing also in Europe. And also Sweden have its own strength to give to NATO. For example, the military industry that they have is a big asset for also the whole alliance. And I think it's in NATO's interest to have both countries within the alliance as soon as possible. And I'm very glad and happy of the also support that Jens personally have given during this process. And of course, the situation where all countries haven't ratified yet, it also, I think, gives a burden to NATO, because we are fulfilling all the criteria. There shouldn't be any problems when it comes to our membership, and I'm hoping that this ratification will
Thank you. Ida Halikainen, Ilta-Sanomat. A question for Mr. Stoltenberg.
If Finland and Sweden are NATO members in Vilna summit, how credible NATO's open door policy actually is? And if you allow me another question for both of you, are you disappointed in something in Finland's and Sweden's NATO process? Thank you.
So first of all, I'm absolutely confident that both Finland and Sweden will become members of NATO. Again, all allies, also Turkey, were part of the decision to invite Finland and Sweden to become members, and all allies, also Turkey, have signed the accession protocols. Finland and Sweden meet the criteria. They have delivered what they are supposed to do. And therefore my message has been, for a long time, but also in Ankara, that the time has come to finalize the ratification process. The time is now to ratify both in Budapest and in Ankara. Then, of course, it is, by the end of the day, a Turkish decision when to ratify. We will continue to have close dialogue with Turkey, because it is important to finalize this as soon as possible. The last question I have forgotten.
Yeah, are you disappointed in something in this process?
First of all, I would like to commend Finland for the courage, for the political leadership, for the ability to take decisions at the critical time for our security. And it demonstrates that NATO's door is open, because actually all allies have invited Finland and Sweden, and they will become members. And this will be good for NATO, it will be good for the Nordic, for the Baltic region. I visited Tallinn just a few days ago, and of course they understand the geography, the importance of having Finland and Sweden as full members. And then it will also be good for Finland and Sweden.
Well, of course, I hope, would have hoped to become members of NATO already. Finland and Sweden fulfill all the criteria, as has been mentioned, and we are yet waiting. And of course, this strains the open door policy of NATO as well. It's to do with NATO's credibility, because we fill all the criteria. But as Jens mentioned, this is in the hands of Turkey and Hungary, and we are waiting for their process to finish. Hopefully sooner than later, hopefully before Vilna's meeting in summer, but we don't know. It's in their hands.
Last question over there.
Johan Palmes from TV2 Norway. It's a question for both of you. Hungary has signaled yet again a delay in its ratification process. Are you in dialogue with the Hungarians about this issue? And is it clear to you what the Hungarians need in order to ratify?
I haven't heard any news of some specific needs for Hungary. They have said all along that they will ratify, that they don't have any problem with Finland or Sweden's NATO membership. They have their own process, their own timetable, and we are waiting there to finish their process. I have, of course, talked with Prime Minister Orban many times during European Council meetings. Also the last time that we met, and he said that they have this timetable, that they will ratify, and they haven't once said that there would be some conditions of our membership applications. On the contrary, they have said very straight that they will ratify, but it will take some time.
Also, nothing to add. We have heard exactly the same messages from Budapest, that they will ratify in the near future. But again, we speak about sovereign national parliaments, and of course they finally decide themselves when to make these decisions. But my message is the same as from Zanna, is that the time has come. Finland meets all the criteria, as do Sweden. So we are working hard, and the aim is to have this in place as soon as possible.
Just a last point. Are you satisfied with the state of democracy and rule of law in Hungary?
Well, I'm very happy that we were able to negotiate the rule of law mechanism when it comes to MFF. I think this has already shown strengths. It's in every European citizen's interest to make sure that rule of law is respected in every country, in Finland and in every member state. So I'm very happy that we were able, actually, when Finland held the presidency of European Council, we were able to connect these two elements, rule of law and MFF, how we use the EU budget. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.